Be alive.
A very good evening, everyone. Welcome to iFocus Online episode 317, Back to Basics Module 7. Today we have with us Dr. Sabyasachi Sengupta, lovingly called as Dr. Sunny Sengupta by the Ophthalmic community from Futurevision and Sengupta's Research Academy, Mumbai, talking to us on essentials of ophthalmic research and publication. A brief introduction for Sir. He has done his diploma in ophthalmology from JIPMER and DNB from Arvind Pondicherry, and his research cum clinical fellowship in vitreoretina from Shankar Nethralaya, and research fellowship from Wilmer Eye Institute, Johns Hopkins, USA. Currently, he's a vitreoretina surgeon practicing at Futurevision Eye Care, Mumbai. He's been an ex-associate editor of Indian Journal of Ophthalmology from 2017 to 2023. He was awarded the McCartney Prize by the Royal College of Ophthalmologists in London, and a matter of pride for us because he was first ever non-British national to receive this award. Dr. G. Venkateswar Swamy Gold Medal in DNB Ophthalmology in 2009, and he has published over 100 papers in index peer-reviewed journals. Also, he has been included in the top 2% of global researchers list by the Stanford University for 2021. He's also the founder of Sengupta's Research Academy, a one-of-its-kind portal offering e-learning lectures on research methodologies and services for manuscript preparation. A very warm welcome to you, sir, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Chef Ali, and very good evening, all of you. I'll quickly share my screen. All right, so I think my screen is visible to all of you, and let's get underway. Just a second. Okay. All right, so let's get started. And I hope, I'll take you through some of the very key essentials in clinical research that will help you publish papers that are meaningful, right? So, before I start, most of the times I start with an inspiration, and I think it is very apt for today when I put up that questions you ask define who you are and not the answers you know. This is clinical research, or generally, research is really about asking questions, right? Asking more and more questions, because the more questions you ask, the more, research questions, they may turn into research questions. So if you ask 100 questions, maybe 4 or 5 will turn out into something that you can pursue, right? Like Professor Amod Gupta says, you need to sort of, find the boundaries of what is known and then venture into what is unknown. It'll happen only if you start asking questions, right? So, even if you remember this one slide throughout the whole presentation, I'll be really happy. Just a second. Yeah. So I thought, I'll just quickly rename this topic in terms of what we are going to learn. And in reality, we're looking from concept to publication, isn't it? So you think about a study, you try and think about different aspects, you design that, and then you go ahead, collect data, you analyze it, and you go ahead and publish it, right? So that is really what we are going to try to learn here in the next half an hour, 40 minutes. Before we get into the nitty-gritties, I'm really proud of this day where, I have been associated with the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology along with Dr. Santosh Honavar, who's been the editor, and, the journal has climbed. This was unimaginable when we took over in 2016-17, where the impact was below 1. And today, as of today, the impact factor is 3.1. So, I was really proud of this. I'm also very proud of my research academy, where we've been training people in doing the clinical research in the right way, and so far we've trained more than 5,000 students from 92 countries over the last 6 years. So whatever I'm going to tell you today is all there on. I'm going to show you a lot of infographics and a lot of tips which will be there. It's very difficult to get into all of them in very much details, because all of them are like separate lectures on their own. But you can actually go and like, or basically just follow Sengupta's Research Academy Facebook page, and you will pretty much get everything that I'm going to talk to you about. And if you see, there are more than 3,000 people following this page already. Some of my financial disclosures, though, none of them are going to have any bearing on anything that I'm going to be actually talking today. Like I said, the overall roadmap to publish, if you think about it, is you plan the study, you execute it, then you analyze and write it up, and then you review what you have done, then you submit to a journal and you publish that paper. And these are all the these are essential or very key or very basic ingredients that we need to publish any paper. I think I've been already introduced, so I won't go into any of this. So, I want to quickly share this clip with you, which is from a Hindi film. And, it has really inspired me over the last decade or so. Just take a quick look and then, we'll proceed.
दिलों में तुम अपनी बेताबियां लेके चल रहे हो तो जिंदा हो, नजर में ख्वाबों की बिजलियां लेके चल रहे हो तो जिंदा हो, हवा के झोंकों के जैसे आजाद रहना सीखो, तुम एक दरिया के जैसे लहरों में बहना सीखो, हर एक लम्हे से तुम मिलो खोले अपनी बाहें, हर एक पल एक नया समा देखे ये निगाहें, जो अपनी आंखों में हैरानियां लेके चल रहे हो तो जिंदा हो तुम, दिलों में तुम अपनी बेताबियां लेके चल रहे हो तो जिंदा हो तुम.
So this betabi, or this eagerness that he's talking about, for me, it's always been about, asking new questions and, pursuing answers that have not been found. And really it means about, research. So, I hope some of you will identify with this thought. Also, I will take another couple of minutes just to think about why this is important, and that's because unless you know the why, and that this has to be known, it's like if somebody asks you, do you really have to know phacoemulsification to be an ophthalmologist? The answer is plain and simple. Heck yes, right? The same way, if somebody asks you, is it important to write papers and publish papers? You will say, probably not, right? I mean, a lot of you will say yes, but then a lot of you will say no. But then, I'll try and show you, why it is so imperative and very important for all of you to get started as early as you can. That's because, quickly think about how medical practice is changing dramatically and how medical practice might look in 2030. The one word which is really coming into vogue now is automations, and they are revolutionizing everything that we're doing today, isn't it? So, so this is a slide which I've made up in 2020 when it was quite difficult for people to understand. But in today's world with Chat GPT and so many other, algorithms coming in, we understand what is automations, right? So, automations essentially were thought about to evolve in 5 levels. Initially, we had only humans, then you had shadow mode where AI was learning. Now we're in the phase of AI assistance, right? Where, if you see, this is a fundus photograph of somebody with diabetic retinopathy using 2 different cameras. And then this is the AI, which is, scrolling over all of these images and trying to see what is pathology and then telling us what is pathology. Right, but then we are quickly going to move into partial automations and perhaps into total automations in 2030, where we might actually look like this, even as surgeons, where we are actually gloved up and really looking at a very large screen, and a lot of it is actually happening on its own. And with a lot of robotics coming in, and a lot of people, you people may not be privy, but I'm involved with a lot of companies. There is a robo which is called the Da Vinci robo, which actually does a lot of laparoscopic cholecystectomies and even hip and knee joint replacements. And there are many companies which are trying to make that Da Vinci work for automated cataract surgeries, right? So even now we are not really looking through microscopes with 3D visualizations available, right? We are actually looking at screens, but our hands are doing things. Soon there will be a time when our hands will not be doing things. And we know that AI is everywhere, right? So it will change the interaction between doctors and patients. A lot of patients may not know how, where it has evolved and how far it is going, but then we as physicians know, right? So is it good or bad? You'll ask, right? It's definitely good for patients, right? Because, we are going to get to more correct diagnosis and, therapeutic options, better options for patients. But it's not so good for physicians, as you can, easily understand. Of course, there are pros and cons of everything, and this is not going to happen overnight. But then it's not really good for physicians because a lot of things that we do today are perhaps going to be automated. This is one of the best books that you can read even now. So this is written by Yuval Noah Harari. And the book is called 21 Lessons from the 21st Century. And really, this is a must read, right? So he coins a term called EdMed. And I'm sure, many of you must have heard about Yuval Noah Harari, and he's in the book which got him to fame. He's a historian. And the book which got him to fame was called Sapiens, right? So he's written this amazing book. He's one of the best thinkers of our times. And he says that EdMed and how it will look in 2030 cannot even be wildly guessed, right? So, we are really looking at things, very rapidly changing things. So how can we be prepared, isn't it? So we know that AI integrations into medicine cannot be stopped, right? So a lot of these diagnostics, medical fields, diabetes, etc., are getting automated, and if Google and Apple decide to, to step into this, there's no way we can push them back, right? However, the good news is that it's not going to happen overnight, and it is still evolving. So we can assist in that evolution and be part of it rather than push back and be against it. So the main question is, how can I be part of this, isn't it? I mean, that is really the dying question. Is all this is really happening quickly, and how can I be part of this? So you need to understand that just being a good phacosurgeon or a good cornea surgeon is not going to cut it in the next 4 or 5 years. You need to understand that you need to break barriers. You need to understand that there has to be new ways to win, isn't it? Like I said, being a good surgeon in the 80s and 90s was a terrific skill. So in the 2000s that there were many, but now there are like too many, right? So you have to think about what more you can do. This is another great book if you want to read. It's not very voluminous, so it's by Michael O'Grady, and it talks about think smart and work smart. And it says don't work hard, work smart. Though that's not true, but then if you go through the book, you'll get a lot of tips on how you can work smart. So how you can be part of this is, by thinking about one important thing, that is data. That is DATA, right? So you need to train yourself with data. You need to learn a basics of analytics and statistics. You need to learn how to present this data well. And then, of course, you need to learn how to write, whatever your findings are, and then make an impression, because now we know that attention spans have dropped to like 3 to 5 seconds, even sometimes lesser when you look at Facebook. But then, if you present something in a very appealing manner, people will take a look at that, right? So data is a new currency, isn't it? It is not the dollar or or the Indian rupee, but data is going to be the new currency, right? So being residents, this is something that you must understand, and you will, like I said, understand that it is imperative that you understand everything, at least not everything, but a little bit about data and statistics and other things. And what this slide really tells you is nothing but clinical research, right? Because you collect data, you do statistics on it, you present it in conference, and then you write it up and publish in a journal. So you need to be good at medical research, right? And you need to be prepared for tomorrow. So this is where we started, where you plan, you analyze, you execute. This was me, getting trained in research techniques in the year 2008. And, I look considerably older now, but that is when my own journey started. And then I did a three-day course at Arvind Eye Hospital in Madurai. Then I did more research training, a whole week training at CMC Vellore. And then I was not satisfied, and I went to the Wilmera Institute at Johns Hopkins and spent more than a year there. And that is when I started getting my head around it. So it takes a lot, it takes time, right? It takes effort, concerted effort. So the more concerted efforts you put into this, the better you'll get. So overall, we're now getting into the nitty-gritties of this in about 10 minutes since we started. So first and foremost is, why should I publish? In addition to it being imperative entirely, but that's in the future. But for today, why should I publish is what we'll look at quickly. Then the second is, how should I publish? The third is, where should I publish? And fourth, then we'll take a look at some important take-home lessons. So these are very essential and core questions for anything you do in life, right? Why, how, and where. And I thought, we'll just basically take a look at this. So first thing is, how should I publish? Oh, sorry, it's why should I publish? And this is a mnemonic that is, so like I said, all of these infographics are present on the Academy Facebook page. So I've coined that, a mnemonic that is famous. It's why you should do research. Don't take it literally, but then FAMOUS has, has its own annotation speech. So F really means fame and recognition, right? So that's, as you can understand, it's going to be part of it. If you do meaningful research, not just any number of papers, but each and every paper which people find it, intriguing, and they read it, and those papers make an impact, that gains you PR respect. So fame and recognition is definitely part of it. A is for patient care, where some of your pivotal research studies have the potential to enhance patient care. Sometimes it will influence millions of lives. So we don't understand a lot when we are actually working on it, but when it goes out and you say that these are the practices that this paper has done, and it will influence millions of lives. So, everyone will have their own examples, but then, you need to work on it. M is make yourself a good clinician. I think it's really important that you write some papers in your budding years, because what happens is there are a lot of deliberations. You talk to your co-authors, you talk to your guides, and then, you submit to a journal, and there are deliberations during publication review process, which make you a great, I won't say a great, but a better thinker. So you will think about that one case report in many different angles. And when you do that 4 or 5 times, that is going to percolate into your subconscious. And then, when you start looking at patients slightly later on, it is bound to make you a good clinician. So you will start asking questions to yourself, like the way journals ask you questions. The journal will grill you before they accept a paper, right? But then that thought process starts happening. You really become a better clinician. O stands for policy decisions, where some of your impactful papers help administrators make policy decisions. Sometimes they allocate funds to public welfare projects, like the NPCB, that is the National Prevention and Control of Blindness program. That is a 5-year plans which happen. A lot of the times they allocate funds based on some of the research which is published in the IJO, which looks at the incidence of blindness in different parts of the country. So don't think that only your peers are going to read your papers. Perhaps down the line, IAS officers may read your papers, politicians may read your papers, judges may read your papers, and pass decisions based on what you've written, right? So policy decisions and many other things can be influenced. Of course, funding and grants are also part of it. So your research makes you eligible to apply for large grants and funding from international funding agencies, right? So there are many international funding agencies. So I would like you to take a look at TrialEct, TRIALECT. So I don't have a screenshot because that website has changed, but TrialEct is the website which you can actually go and make your profile there, and you can. There are 2 main things that you will learn. One is research fellowships which are getting available mainly in Europe, and they are like fully funded fellowships for 3 months and 6 months. And many of them have actually hands-on experience. And this other is grants, based on the way you create your profile. So funding and grants is part of it. And of course, a personal index, it really means how much impact you are having, right? So and in other words, it means citations. So if your paper are having a lot of citations, that means, it is influencing a lot of other people after the paper is getting published. So remember that the paper getting published is the end for you, but it's the start for that paper, and it's going to remain forever, right? On the websites and on PubMed. So many people will look at those papers perhaps many years later, and then they will cite your papers. It will help your personal growth and your prestige in the medical community as a whole, right? So every paper you write, you should think about whether it is going to impact things, how meaningful is it, and others. So after looking at why you should do this, and the mnemonic is famous, but then like I said, it's not, though there is fame and recognition to it, but then that is not the only thing you should look for. After that, let's look at how you should publish. So this is really from concept to publication, isn't it? So first is every study goes through this pipeline or these phases. First is the idea. So where do you get that idea from? Second is then you want to design that study, right? So what is the best design for my study is something that we'll look at. Then execution and analysis, which really means statistics, which we have a whole session for a couple of days later. And then the next thing that you need to do is write and publish your work, right? So like I said, we don't have too much time to go into too many details of each of these, because each of them is like the whole lecture on its own. But then I'll give you some some thought processes that you can take and evolve gradually and learn more. So first is, how do you get that idea from? Right, so that idea is so important. It's so critical, because if it's something that has been done too many times, then you're not going to get anywhere, right? So this is another infographic. Like I said, you can get this on the Facebook page. 1 second. So the first thing is you can subscribe to e-table of contents to some of the top journals, and so every journal publishes its e-table of contents and sends it to you free of cost to your to your email inbox, right? So journals like Ophthalmology, JAMA Ophthalmology, British Journal of Ophthalmology, Survey Ophthalmology, Retina, cornea, based on your subspecialty interests, Journal of Glaucoma, etc. So you can go to their websites and actually subscribe to their e-table of contents. So if you have subscribed to say 5 e-table of contents, every month, whatever is getting published will come to your inbox. you're bound to see those titles which are being published, right? In the inbox, your email will have the title of the study, and it will have links to go to the feed free abstract, and sometimes to the full feed free paper also, right? So, at least you will read about 10 topics in each journal. So if you have subscribed to 5 journals, imagine that you're going through 50 topics, isn't it? So that is bound to, if you have that mindset, which you should, then you will have 50 different topics that you're going to go through, right? And it will be through different specialities, but then at least 1 or 2 will spark your idea, and you'll say, oh, this is something that we can do as well, right? So this is a website of the JAMA Ophthalmology journal. So this is where you get this. So it just says get the latest from JAMA Ophthalmology, email address, and just click sign up. And then every month it's as easy as that. Even Ophthalmology or American Journal, it's as easy as that. So you can go to their websites and try to find where you can subscribe to the e-table of contents or e-subscriptions, and then this is what you can do. There's some other ways of getting a good idea, right? So one is PubMed updates, where you can make PubMed work for yourselves. You can create a PubMed account. You can create a free PubMed account, and then you can save your searches with those specific keywords, and then tell PubMed that whatever matches this search, I want to know about it. And you can say, I want to know about it every day or every week or whatever. That's what I do. I tell PubMed that I want these papers which are published on, say, my topics of interest, say diabetic macular edema, whatever. And then, PubMed sends me these papers every Saturday evening. So I can actually, whatever I'm doing, I can open those emails and see these are 3 or 4 important papers which have been published in that topic. Let's say, it's very good when you're doing a thesis, because you will have a literature review and then you will start your study. But then maybe something very important and very pivotal would have been published when you're actually doing your thesis. And if you don't revisit your literature again later on, and then you might actually miss it. So it's important that you keep in touch with what is happening in your in that field that you're doing. Other thing is that if you see too many patients on a particular disease, say corneal ulcer or whatever that may be, you can go and tell PubMed that I want any new thing which is published on fungal corneal ulcer using say voriconazole or something like whatever you're interested in, and then PubMed will keep sending you those. So they will be a source of ideas, right, for you to choose your topics. Of course, ideas for clinics should never be disregarded and thrown out. Maybe a junior might walk up to you and say, why, what is this? And, they may ask a question and you may not know about it as well, even if you're well read. And then that may actually turn out to be a research question. Or so then never stop asking questions. Like I said, simple things like, oh, I treated it in the copybook way, but then patient has not responded. And then many patients have not been responding to what the book says or what these papers say. That means there is something different happening here. So you need to dig deep and, so there are ideas from clinics that you can get. You can join collaborations. There are many online collaborations which happen nowadays, or you can go to, major conferences where people who are doing collaborative studies are having meetings. You can meet up with them. Journal clubs are also another way of getting good ideas where, so journal club really means that you are discussing a published paper. And at the end of the paper, you could always think about what you could do in that field, right? Any study that you could do in that domain. So that also starts giving you ideas. And like I said, attend meetings. One of the goals of attending meetings should be to discuss your ideas with people who are in that field. So I also used to often write emails. Nowadays, communication is easy, but when I was doing my residency in 2004-05, it wasn't that easy. But I used to write emails to people and say, I am also attending this conference and I would like to spend say 10 minutes with you discussing this or that. And believe me, almost everybody would reply instantly and say, why not? So, and they would tell me, we could meet at lunch on day 2 or whatever. And then, so brainstorm with them, tell them about what you're thinking, and they could also help you. This is something that we already looked at. So that's how you can get many different ideas from. Let's now look at the design of the study. So what is the design for my study? People talk about prospective, retrospective, this, that. But then, before you get to that, something that you must consider is the mnemonic is called PICO or PICOT, where P stands for the participants. Before you think about prospective, retrospective, randomization and all, there's something that you should think about, where P stands for participants. That is nothing but inclusion and exclusion criteria. So think hard about who you want to include and who you don't want to include, right? Or you want to exclude. Remember that if too many people are getting excluded, that means your study will be applicable only to those kind of patients whom you have included, right? So if it's too stringent, then there won't be widespread applicability of your results later on. So think about this hard. I stands for intervention, or also some people call it E instead of I, and E is the exposure. So this really means intervention. That word brings up surgery in our minds, but then I, or intervention, or the exposure, really means what you're using to gather your data. So it could of course very well be a surgery, but it could be a drug or some medicine, or it could be a questionnaire. We now know there are a lot of questionnaire based studies which keep happening in others. So whatever you're using to gather your data is the exposure or the intervention. So it could be, like I said, a questionnaire or a drug therapy or surgery or anything else that the participants are going to get exposed to. C stands for comparison group. So does your study need any comparison group? So remember that this cannot be recruited later, right? You can't undo it. Even if it's a retrospective study, unless you have thought about it and gathered data at that time, it's otherwise painful to go back and keep getting data of say non-exposed people. It can be active or passive, like placebo. Nowadays, we don't have placebo controlled studies, but overall, you think about who your comparison group should be, and it helps to quantify superiority or equivalence of the new intervention. A lot of people say, oh, this is a new surgery which I've come up with, or, this is a new way of doing, say, a glaucoma surgery or a scleral fixated IOL, and then it works wonders. But then we need to prove whether it's as good as what we are doing today, isn't it? So in your hands, it may be, but but then others who are doing the surgery, why should they adopt it? Because the previous thing works very well in their hands anyway. So unless you have a comparison group, how will you know, right? So it is very important that you think about a comparison group before you get started. So I'll tell you an example which I came across almost a month back, where there is a group which is talking about a new intraocular lens. And that intraocular lens works like a regular presbyopic glass or a progressive glass that we call it, where the upper part looks at the distance intermediate part of that lens in a seamless way, looks at the intermediate part, and the lower part of the lens looks at the reading ability. And they're saying that oh, this is a revolutionary lens in others. But then many multinational pharmaceutical companies who make intraocular lenses, this is a very simplistic design. But then why are they spending billions of dollars designing lenses which are more complicated? There is diffraction, there is refraction, and there is apodization. There are so many different things. So if your lens is that good, then why are others going through so many painful processes? So you need to compare your new with something which is already established, isn't it? Say a multifocal lens which is used today. So without a comparison group, how will you know whether it's as good or not, right? So remember that's a very important question. O stands for outcome measures. So you need to define your outcome measures very well, right? So, and importantly, what is your primary outcome? So primary outcome really is that one study question that you began with to answer, you're doing this whole thing to answer that one initial question. So the primary outcome measure is really important, and everything revolves around that. So define it really well. And then what are secondary outcome measures, and what you're going to measure and how you're going to get data about this outcome measure. Right. So I'll give you an example. Say your outcome measure is talking about intraocular pressure. And so when you talk about intraocular pressure, you could say drop in intraocular pressure in terms of millimeters of mercury, right? Where you will have, say, a mean and standard deviation of the drop. Say one drug led to 3 plus or minus 2 millimeter mercury drop, and the other group led to, say, 4 plus or minus whatever drop in intraocular pressure. So that is one way of looking at it. You could also say, I will look at percentage of eyes which had intraocular pressure below 18 in each group. So, you will say one drug led to about 80% patients coming to IOP below 18, and the other group led to, say, 90% IOP below 18. Remember, this outcome is a percentage or a proportion. This is entirely different from that previous one that we talked about, which talked about means, isn't it? So, though they might intuitively sound similar, but they're very, very different, right? So it's important, like I said, you have to define that outcome measure very well. And then comes the T, or the type of the study. Whether you want to do a prospective or a retrospective study, whether you want to have randomization and perhaps masking as part of the study design. So remember that masking does not always go hand in hand with randomization. So even a retrospective study could have an element of masking, or a prospective study could have an element of masking. Let's say, for example, somebody is doing a study on optic OCT features of some, say, particular disease. Now you're going to go back and look at all the OCTs of your inclusion patients, right? So, the person looking at the OCT should not know, which drug the patient had, or, whatever that may be. So that is a masking, right? So masking is important. So in, blinding, we don't use the word blinding in ophthalmology. So that's why you use the word masking. So, think about whether you need masking, even if you're not doing randomization. Then, what are the sample size that you need to start with, and this should be done before you start, right? Then what are your own limitations, and can the study be done? It's a feasibility thing. If something needs OCT angiography that you have in mind, but then you don't have an OCTA machine, and that you have to send it to neighboring hospital for OCTA all the time, it's really not feasible. Sometimes cost is reasonably high, and then that may prevent you from doing a study like that, right? So these are some of the questions that you should ask when you're designing a study. In short, it's the PICO or the PICOT approach. After the design, what we look at is execution and analysis, right? So by that, what we really mean is analysis really means looking at statistics, right? So how do we do statistics, and how do we interpret that? Now, fortunately, we have a whole session for this, so on basics of biostatistics. I think it's day after tomorrow. So we'll go into the nitty-gritties of how we do statistics and how we make good tables, figures, and how we essentially interpret data that is coming in from all your study that's being done. So this is again something that we'll take a look at more in detail. So I'm going to entirely skip it for today. So once you've got the idea and it is novel, and you've gone ahead, designed a good study using different approaches that we've talked about, and you have already gathered data and analyzed that paper, then comes the question of writing that paper, right? So you need to write and publish it well, right? So you need to choose a proper journal for this, and and you need to write it in a way that almost all non-negotiable aspects will be covered, right? So let's look at how we can do this. And again, we need at least an hour's time to actually show you what are the different nitty-gritties of writing a paper, and then we don't have that much time. But I'll try and look at some of the basics. So writing a paper is something that we'll look at next. Again, this is another great book if you have the time to look up. This is called The Checklist Manifesto: How to Get Things Right by Atul Gawande. He's a general surgeon in the US, and very, very famous author, and he's written a lot of books, and I've read all of them. And make time to read these books, because they are really amazing. So best ways to use checklists for writing your papers, right? So it really ensures quality, objectivity, thoroughness, and critique. So some of the things that are very important, say simple things like ethics committee clearance was taken and it was approved by the ethics committee, right? So that is a sentence which is essential for any method section, and any method section of a good paper should start with something like that. But then, you might just forget it, though you have taken ethics approval and everything else, but you might actually not include that statement in your method section. And then, it might be returned back to you saying that, oh, this is not there, and without this, we won't send it out for review. So there goes a 2-3 month delay straight away, right? So if you use checklists, you will not falter on some of these very basic things that, you should look at. Outline of any paper goes through the IMRAD format, where introduction, I stands for introduction, M stands for methods, R stands for results, and D stands for discussion, right? So like I said, we need a lot of time to get into nitty-gritties of these, but then overall the introduction should, tell people two things: what is known about the study, and then what is not known about the study, about this topic. And what is not known, why is it important for us to know? So sometimes it may be not known, but then, so what? How will it influence my decision or my choices? So that is like a what if paper. But then, the best papers are the ones where that study question or that gap in literature has been identified by the author, and it has been put into the introduction section. And as an editor or a somebody on the editorial board, what I do is I look at, we would look at, typically like say 20-30 articles a week, sometimes 50 articles a week, right? So what I really look at is, the introduction and the last paragraph of the introduction, which says, that this is the gap in literature and this is important to do, and that's why we went ahead and did it, right? So that introduction is really important. Method section is relatively easy to write, where you tell people what you exactly did, in a stepwise fashion. So you took ethics clearance, then you had inclusion, exclusion, and then you went ahead and did that intervention. You gathered data and you analyzed it. And remember that method section again uses that PICO approach to write. Result section should primarily concentrate on the primary outcome measure, right? I'll give you another example. You say in a patient in a study of phacotrabeculectomy, where you're trying to reduce intraocular pressure as well as improve the vision of a patient. So in this kind of a study, the primary outcome should be intraocular pressure, isn't it? Because that's what it's all about, because you're doing a trabeculectomy. Now, a lot of people will write results where they will talk about the mean age, baseline vision improved so much, and then in so many % patients vision didn't improve, and this is the reason for vision not improving. And finally, there will be 1 or 2 lines which says mean preoperative intraocular pressure was 30, and then mean pre or post-operative intraocular pressure was 15 or whatever. So just 1 sentence on intraocular pressure. That will be the last sentence of the results. Right. So that's where a lot of our, that focus goes away, especially when you're writing and, you are not concentrating on, the actual things that are supposed to be. So remember that results should focus primarily on the primary outcome. And then discussion really means how you fit your findings in existing literature. It's a jigsaw, and that gap you have found. Now, how do you, compare your results with what has already been done before? And do you agree with papers before? Do you disagree with papers before? And why? So if you disagree, you need to come up with why. It could be a methodological difference, or it could actually be, a whole different angle that you are, sort of bringing out. So the discussion really is important in terms of how you will fit your, findings with existing literature, right? So remember that the methods are the ones which are most important for a reviewer, because if you've done things properly, then people will be interested in reading your results. So I find that when I'm reviewing papers, I don't go beyond the method so many times, because there are so many loopholes in the way the study has been done, including from inclusion, exclusion to absence of a comparison group and all, that the results are not at all meaningful. And then there goes another rejection, right? So remember that, design it. So that's why designing that initial using the PICOT approach is really important. So a lot of decisions happen at the level of the method section. Now, this is something that all of you again should explore. This is the Equator Network. And so this is the equator-network.org. This website hasn't changed for quite a long time. And it talks about reporting guidelines for main study types, where it talks about, so this is CONSORT, and it's the checklist for writing randomized trials. Observational studies is STROBE, systematic reviews is PRISMA, case reports is CARE. So when you click on these, you will, all of those checklists will open up and they are free for you to use. They are also there on the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology, page for authors, where we have segregated it in terms of which checklist you should use for which kind of study. So you can take a look at that as well. So these are all mnemonics. Like I said, STROBE is for observational studies, CONSORT is for randomized trials, RECORD is for retrospective studies, CARE is for case reports. But IMRAD format is there in pretty much all of these, except for, of course, case reports. And this is a checklist. This is a form that you will see on that website, and it looks quite complicated and scary. But let's go over 1 or 2. Say you're writing a case report. Now it asks Equator. This is the title, right? So first question was the research on humans. Easy enough. You'll say yes. Then did your research generate quantitative data? Right? Quantitative data means you have collected data from many people and you've done some analysis. But if it's a case report, it's a single case, right? So you'll say no. Then it says, did you pool results of previous studies? That is in the form of review. Again, you'll say no. And then it says, do you describe a clinical case or a series of cases? If you say yes, it will lead you to the CARE checklist. Right, something like that. So this is the CONSORT checklist. This is the STROBE checklist. So, again, if it's a quantitative data, if you say yes, then it will say, did you combine and analyze results of previous studies? That's a review form. You'll say no, because this is original article, right? Was your study a randomized trial of 2 or more health interventions? If it's a yes, you will go to CONSORT. If it's a no, then the next question is, did your study explore the relationship between exposure to risk or protective factors and outcomes? And most of the time, this will be yes, because that's what we are really doing if we are not randomizing. So the answer is STROBE. So this will lead you to the exact checklist that you should, because you are new and you don't know which checklist to use. This can also help in actually choosing, choosing the checklist. The STROBE really means strengthening the reporting of observational studies in epidemiology initiative. That is the STROBE checklist. It's the gold standard checklist for prospective observational studies. The record means the reporting of studies conducted using observational routinely collected health data. So that is a record checklist. It's a modification of the STROBE, but it's quite different. So this is a gold standard for reporting on retrospective studies. CONSORT stands for Consolidated Standards of Reporting Trials. Same way there are, Quorum, Moose, Prisma, and all of these. There are other applications of checklists. So in addition to writing your own papers, what you can do is you can use these checklists when you're presenting journal club articles. It's a great way of encouraging clinical research in your departments. If you're HODs, or even if you're if you're a group of residents and your staff doesn't have enough time, you could all get together yourselves and sort of pick out a paper from the IGO or somewhere and try and use these checklists and see what is there and what is not there, and you will really find that there are a lot of things which the paper has missed. Right. Also, you can, so in journal clubs, really you learn something new and you learn to critically analyze an already peer-reviewed scientific publication. So this checklist will help you doing that. And also, if some of you are senior enough to review papers for some top-notch journals, then you can actually use checklists to do those as well. Now, how do you find the best fit for your article? So what is the best fit journal? Again, this is an infographic, so you need to ask yourself these 10 questions. I'll quickly go over them. First thing is it an index journal? What does indexing mean? So what is an index? If you don't think about PubMed or anything else, when you open a textbook and you want to go to a particular chapter on a particular disease, you can't just keep searching, right? What you will open is the first page and you will try and look at the index and see, where is it, which page number or which volume or whatever. Same way, there are these indexes like PubMed and others, which will do the same thing. So they are a database where everything which is getting published in medical literature is being put on that website. And if somebody wants to search, suppose you have a book which has, if you're reading a book which has like 10 volumes and it's, it's like 10,000 pages, it's almost impossible, right? So what you can do is you can just say Control F or find and then type that name of the chapter and, you could go to that chapter and read it. Same way, PubMed, it will help people get to that paper if it's indexed. So remember that a journal which is indexed, so the index which is the most important one is PubMed. And why it is so? Because any journal, any Tom, Dick and Harry journal cannot get indexed into PubMed because there are a lot of regulations which are required for a journal to get indexed into PubMed. So if there is one question you want to ask before you submit to a particular journal, remember that it should be PubMed indexed. If it is PubMed indexed, you can just close your eyes and just think about submitting a paper. If it is not PubMed indexed, then it's probably safe to not submit to that journal, right? So today I got an email from somebody very quite famous, and they said, oh, this is a journal which is asking me for a review article, should I go ahead and submit? I clearly said that this is not PubMed index, don't do it. And so there are other indexes like SCI or Science Citation Index Expanded, which is maintained by Web of Science, and this is the one which gives the impact factors and others like Scopus, Embase, etc. But most importantly, if you are looking at an index journal, it should be PubMed indexed. Second thing is the journal peer reviewed? Peer review really means when you submit a paper, the editor looks at that paper, and then if he finds that it's relatively good enough, then he'll send it to a group of experts in that particular field that you have submitted the paper to. They're called reviewers. They're peer reviewers. So they will send their queries back, and then the editor will send it to you as an author, and then you will revise your paper and others. So there are some journals which are not peer reviewed, believe it or not. So then you need to understand who is looking at a paper, and what is the peer review process that the journal follows, right? So look at this, and importantly under that, is the journal a member of ICMJ, COPE? COPE is the Committee of Publication Ethics. DOAJ is open access directory, open access journals. So these are some of the ones which make give guidelines for proper peer review and others. So is the journal peer reviewed is the next question. But if it's an index journal, it will be peer reviewed. Then does the journal have an impact factor? So remember that having an impact factor and being indexed in PubMed are two entirely different things. So impact factor is given by Web of Science or Science Citation Index Expanded, and the organization which does it is called Clarivate Analytics. It's entirely different from PubMed, right? So however, most of the good journals are analyzed by Clarivate Analytics, and you get an impact factor. The higher the impact factor, the better the journal. Next is, who is your target audience? Now, this was about the journal, right? Now, next is, who is your target audience? Excuse me. Is it a national, regional, or an international audience? I mean, is your paper, important for an international audience? Say something about phacoemulsification or something like that, or is it a national or a regional audience which will be more interested? Say like corneal ulcers or something which is not seen much in the West. So then, your regional or your national journal may be a better choice. Is it a subspecialty paper kind of thing, or all physicians may be interested in that paper? So then you could also look at other journals like medicine and others. And then in ophthalmology, is it very subspecialty, or all general ophthalmologists will be interested in that? Say like something very niche about using tubes in glaucoma surgery, or something like using a new drug for treating vitreoretinal diseases, or surgical vitreoretinal procedure. Most likely that only retina specialists or glaucoma specialists may be interested in that. So who is your target audience? You can think about a journal based on that. The next is, does the journal accept manuscripts from all specialties? So broader the specialty, the wider the so one second. Yeah. So the broader the specialty, the wider the reader base. Remember that, and better the impact factor. But then, like I said, is it a subspecialty journal, or is it a broad specialty in ophthalmology, and or whether you're looking at a wider audience and that journal accepts papers from all over medicine, something like that. So that is it. Then scope of the journal. It is available on every website of the journal, and look at the type of manuscripts it accepts. Does it take case reports at all? And if at all it does, then what is that called? And say, for example, JAMA Ophthalmology takes case reports. Though they say it is not a case report, they don't take case reports, but that case report is called a photo essay. Ophthalmology journal does not take case reports. They categorically say that. But then, that case report is called pictures and perspectives. So all these top journals do take these short kind of, communications, just they don't call it that. So that is the scope of the journal. Also, another example of a mistake that you should not be doing, say, for example, Journal of Cataract and Refractive Surgery is the main journal for cataract surgery. However, it is a purely clinical journal. It will not take a paper on epidemiology of cataract. You say, oh, we did a study on 4,000 patients, and then the incidence of cataract is, say, whatever percent in this population. So JCRS will clearly reject it, because it's not the scope of the journal. You need to look at a journal which does that, like BJO or like, IOVS or something like that. That's what the scope of the journal. Then you can ask your peers or sometimes your seniors, what would be their journal of choice for a paper like this? What is the acceptance rates of that journal? So it will usually be there in that About Us section. Then what is the processing time? Does it take too much time? Again, it should be there in the About Us section, but that is what is the turnover time, right? So, or you can look at some full texts, and on the first page at the bottom, you will see date submitted, date accepted, and date published, right? So that will actually give you a timeline, and you can find out how much time that journal takes. And then always look at whether the journal is an open access or a predatory journal. That is, it is asking you to pay money. To get to peer review, they're asking you to pay money upfront straight away. So it is called article processing charge, or APC. We can't go too much in nitty-gritties of what a predatory journal is, but then I have a blog on that on my website. You can take a look. Try and differentiate whether it's a predatory journal or not. So these are some of the points you should think about when you're thinking about choosing a journal. This is another website which will give you all this information. It's called the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, right? So that's the ICMJ. So most editors of medical journals keep visiting this website and are, like I have subscribed to the newsletter of this every week. Generally, I get something interesting from this body. And, so this says reads the recommendations for conduct, reporting, editing, and writing, right? So if you see, most journals, the instruction to authors comes from this body, right? So this also gives information on how to write papers. So you can take a look at this as well. There's another paper which I was fortunate to get published in the IGO. It was written in 2014, but believe me, after 10 years, it's still very valid, and it talks about the art of scientific writing. And pretty much whatever we discussed about the IMRAD, that is introduction, methods, results, and discussion, is part of this paper. It's of course free to download, and it has been downloaded more than 6,000 times. So this is something which you can also take a look at. This is my website, Sengupta's Research Academy. Some of you may have seen it. This is the e-learning lecture, and there are some free lectures as well. And these are some of the things that you can learn from these modules. These are all paid modules, but this is just for you to see that you can learn about how to do a good literature review, how to choose a research topic. There's a lot more than what we talked about today, and then how to actually use PubMed, and then how to design studies well. A whole module on biostatistics. So we'll be discussing some parts of this day after tomorrow. And then, something about how to choose a journal, writing individual reports, and then how to deal with rejections and others, right? So this is a longer fellowship, 1-month fellowship, which is there. If some of you are interested, you can pursue this as well. There are very interesting blogs on the Academy website, which talk about p-values, regressions, thesis to journal articles, may be very important for residents. Others like odds ratios, and how to write good abstracts and others, right? So this is something that we do every month. These are workshops. If you see, there are about 16 workshops which have been done over the last 2 years. So there's a workshop which will be coming up on paper writing 1 month. I think that's in July. So whatever we have discussed so far, the nitty-gritties of each going into details will be discussed in some of these workshops. So you can, like I said, you can follow the Facebook page of the Academy, and almost all announcements will be made on that. So overall take-home messages, I think you should now see that this is really important to do, right? So to get ready for 2030, there's something that is absolutely essential for you to do. So you need to train yourselves. There are courses, my course, and there are so many others. Then you need to design and conduct good studies, perhaps think about being part of collaborations. Then you need to understand how to analyze data and some basics of biostatistics, which we will talk about day after tomorrow. And in manuscript writing, trust me, using checklists is like the best approach. Instead of going through the rigors and getting rejected and then learning, it's best that you start a checklist, and there are about 20 questions in each of these checklists. If you write one sentence which answers those 20 questions, and you have like 20 statements, so say 25 statements, pretty much more than half of your paper is ready there, right? So use checklists. That's the best approach. And then, of course, you will be ready to go ahead and publish papers in most of the reputed journals. Like I said, think about breaking barriers and being future ready. So I'll just stop my presentation here, and I'll be happy to take questions if you have any.
Yes, sir. It was a very interesting session, I must say, sir. And specifically in a country like India, where we have such a high volume of patients, we devote ourselves so much into clinical work that we tend to neglect research work completely, which the same mistake I have done in my residency. So it was a very interesting session, sir. And you have covered almost everything so beautifully, but still, if you permit, I would like to take some questions from different social media portals.
Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, so the first question we have is, can you please give some pointers regarding how to conduct a research project in a private setup?
So the setting is very important, like you said, but then pretty much everything what we discussed now is going to be part of any study that you do. So you can't say, oh, I'm in a private setup, so I won't take a control group, or I'll write it differently. So it's pretty much the same. Only thing is that in a private setup or a solo practice, say, for example, or in a group practice or in a corporate hospital, that mindset really has to be there. I think that is the first and foremost, and that you need to understand that this is important for me to do. Right, that is the first and foremost. Once done, then there are two key things that you can do. One is have research coordinators. Research coordinators will, because you don't want to spend time recruiting patients, getting their consent. Who will do this? It's very important that you continue your work. So the only thing you can do is, when you see a patient, you'll say, okay, this is good for inclusion, and that's about it. Then the research coordinator takes over. Makes the patient go through all the inclusion tests, and then whatever study has to be done, everything, and then at every follow-up visit they call the patient, they get them back, they accumulate all the data, say OCT, or whatever scans have to be done, and then physician examination, and patient will be gone home. So the patient also feels relatively special. Oh, somebody is waiting for me at the gate. Wow, that's like brilliant, right? So that's something that you can do, and then it helps recruiting patients, and the name also spreads overall. So that mindset change has to happen. That's the first and foremost. Second thing is having research coordinators will ease your pain points, to do. But then everything else is pretty much the same. The data analysis, data recruitment. Last thing is that private practitioners who have relatively good volumes and have EMR in their settings can actually export data from EMR, because that could be retrospective studies, right? So if your EMR allows exporting data into an Excel, that will be great, because that can be done. If your EMR does not allow exporting data, you can use a software called RedCap, REDCAP. It's a paid software, of course, but then RedCap makes it ridiculously easy for you to export data. So if there is a page per patient and it has intraocular pressure, vision, this, that, RedCap simply allows you to place boxes on these, because that user interface will look the same for every patient, isn't it? So then, you just tell RedCap that these are the patients and these are the things that I want in my Excel. And that's about it. It'll execute and you will have an Excel sheet, out straight away. So RedCap is another thing that, people could use.
Okay, sir. In addition to that, any specific precautions to be taken while taking consent from the patients, specifically in a private setup?
So one thing I actually forgot is having ethics. So if you are looking at doing prospective studies, then ethics committee and ethics approval becomes important. So the latest regulations are that the ethics committee, so as of 2022, is that ethics committee should be part of your geographic location. So it need not be in your own institution. So there are a lot of ethics committees which very large hospitals actually now take extramural projects. These are projects from outside. Say if I am in a particular city and there's a large hospital, like an Apollo or something, which has ethics committees, then you can actually put up your proposals to that hospital, and they will do all the necessary documentation, and then they'll give you an approval. So that is something that you can do. Like you said, if it's a prospective study, another thing, then it really becomes important to take consent properly. If it's a randomized trial and it's a industry sponsored study, then it really becomes important to have video documentation. Because if there is these are going to be more and more in India. A lot of international pharma is looking at doing clinical trials in India. So I was having a meeting with somebody higher up in Pfizer, and so there are large extraordinary reports from the US, which have been done by like Price Waterhouse and others. So very top-notch people have looked into this, and they said that doing research in India in the government setup is no good. So we want to look at the private sector now to recruit patients. So it's going to happen more and more that people will come to India and try and recruit patients from your hospitals, who of you are listening. So then a precaution is if it's a sponsored study, like a new drug or something, then have video documentation of that consent process. If you don't have an ethics committee and you don't have research coordinators, no company is going to look at you in terms of recruitment. So these are some basics that you should probably think about. But then I don't think there is anything specific in terms of recruitment. Lastly, if you're thinking about doing this and using patients' data for analysis, then it makes sense to have a consent form when they enter into your hospital, which says that, you give consent for examination and for your subsequent data to be used for studies which will not reveal your identity. So that all that is already in place. It's like a blanket.
Is there any particular group or website where clinicians from different geographical locations can interested in a similar topic can collaborate and join together for a same study?
So there is nothing really at present where all this happens, except for large conferences, where a lot of people get together, say, and they have extremely good poster sessions. Say the biggest one is called ARVO, that is the Association of Research and Vision in Ophthalmology. They have an annual conference where not only clinicians, but a lot of basic scientists are there. People doing imaging of the eye are there, people doing non-mydriatic imaging, people doing, all sorts of things are there, like they are making AI, they're making machines to operate on humans. they're all non-clinical people. So, a lot of people get together in these meetings. So if you put up a poster there, and then, at your session, you will see that at least 10 people will come. If it's interesting enough, 10 people will come, they will give you their card, and they'll say, we are also interested in this. Why don't you get in touch? And others, so large meetings, unfortunately, the AIOS is not a meeting of that caliber as yet. But then, most of the international meetings think about, sort of going and presenting posters. That gives you time to interact and, discuss. As of now, we don't have anything where, people will, look at that. But then, sometimes you can make a point to write to, there is always a full text article will always have the corresponding author's email. So, if you're interested, you could, write to them and say, this is something that we have a lot of patients about, and, we could do collaborative research and things. So, it could also work. But then, to directly answer your question, there is nothing as such.
Okay. So the last question we have from a postgraduate student is how to check for plagiarism.
And first and foremost, there should be no need to check for it, because if you have done it, that's about it, right? So, and people say, oh, ho gaya mujhse, or people say, oh, I never knew. But that's not at all how it is. In today's world, that can never happen, right? So if it's either purposeful plagiarism or it is no plagiarism at all. First and foremost, just don't do it. Just don't copy people's work and pass it off as your own. And once you don't do that, there will be no need to check for plagiarism. The only software which is really, people will look at, you can Google up and you will get a list of like top 10, top 20. And whoever are writing it are actually people making those softwares. So Google is not really the best place to check for many things, including these. But the main important software which people use or journals use, and not only medical journals, like the Washington Post or the New York Times and all, is called iThenticate. Okay, so iThenticate is the one which you should go to, and you can just Google up. So iThenticate version 2 is now available. And what you can do is, you need to buy credits, right? So minimum is $100 of credit, and it lets you check almost a paper which is like 75,000 words long, or I think there are 3 papers which is some 10,000 or less, something like that. So if you buy credits, then you can, say a group of residents can, 3 residents or 4 residents can buy, say $100 credit, which is not expensive really. And then you can run your, checks through that. So a lot of institutions have iThenticate access. Every international journal has iThenticate access. So if you do it, it will be caught. So iThenticate also, some of the top institutions like Johns Hopkins, where I trained, what they do is everything that is published in a week, they will just upload it onto iThenticate, and they'll say, run plagiarism checks for all these papers, like 250 papers a week. Run checks for all these papers and tell me if anybody has plagiarized anything from any of these papers. And if you have done it, it will be caught. That's about it. So people say, Arey, how did that author know that I have, taken like these 4 sentences out of that? But that is how they do it. So iThenticate is like the best. Don't look at anything else. There are many like Grammarly and, so many others, but iThenticate is the authentic, authentic one is iThenticate.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering all our questions. And over to you, Dr. Shefali.
Thank you so much, sir. I can see like the passion that you have for the research, and so much of hard work, I think, has gone behind your academy. Probably we can talk more about how this seed was sown for the academy to come about, and how do you actually spend so much time holding courses, even with a very hectic practice that I can imagine, and being a full-time clinician. So probably we can talk about that story in the next session that we have with you on Friday.
Absolutely.
So really look forward to your session, sir. And next we meet on June 30, which is Essentials of Medical Statistics. And I'm sure after today's lecture, you don't want to miss that lecture from sir. So see you all on 30th June.